that light immediately. And this song is called The Deer's Cry because when St. Patrick saw a small army of people coming towards him with chariots and stuff, he was quite terrified. And supposedly this is the prayer, and some people say that they magically became a flock of deer and ran away, and other people say that the deer came in between them and the small army. And I've chosen this song because it's so full of the richness of God in creation. I rise today through the strength of heaven, light of sun, radiance of the moon, splendor of fire, speed of lightning, swiftness of wind, depth of the sea, stability of earth, and firmness of rock. I rise today through God's strength to pilot me, God's eye to look before me, God's wisdom to guide me, God's way to lie before me, God's shield to protect me from all who should wish me ill, afar and near, alone and in a multitude, against every cruel, merciless power that may oppose my body and soul. And this next bit is called a lorica. It's so true of not just the Celtic tradition, but lots of earth-based traditions, where you place the sacred in and all around you. And I've been using this as I pray for my friends and loved ones and people I don't know who are surrounded by fire. But these, going back, these were the words that supposedly St. Patrick said. Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left, Christ when I lie down, Christ when I arise, Christ when I take rest, Christ to shield me. It's good to try on the prayers of other people, so I invite you to stop your thinking, message, sermon brain, close your eyes and just drop into the prayer. Love with me, love before me, love behind me, love in me, love beneath me, love above me, love on my right, love on my left, love when I lie down, love when I arise, love when I take rest, love to shield me. Love in the heart of everyone who thinks of me, love in the mouth of everyone who speaks of me. You can find musical settings like that borrowed heavily on Sean Davies' version of The Deer Cry. Okay, so you can put your meditation and sermon brain back on. I heard this once. This is called A History of Christianity in 10 Seconds by a guy called Paul Smith. Christianity began in Palestine as an experience. It moved to Greece and became a philosophy, It shifted to Italy and became an institution, and then arrived in Europe and became a culture, and eventually jumped to America where it became a big business. And the reason that so many of us are very drawn to the Celtic traditions and other, like the Coptic Church or the Indian Church, places that were kind of outside of the institution. Paul Smith says it shifted to Italy, went to Rome, and the Roman Empire in the year, I think it was 313, adopted Christianity as the official religion. And Christianity changed drastically at that point. But the Celtic nations of Scotland and Ireland and the Celtic nations that were occupied always remained different. So when the Romans came, they brought Christianity with them, and that message spread. And quite early on, we think the Christian tradition arrived in Britain, probably 100 years after Jesus died. The culture there didn't really write things down. It was the Romans that wrote things down. So we're talking about an oral culture. I'll talk more about that later. And the Romans hated the Celts. They wrote terrible things about us. They honored us as fierce warriors. We once we burned down some of their cities, and we fought with them a lot, but they could not subdue the Scots. They built a wall. It's called Hadrian's Wall, and they just banished everything north of that, which is Scotland, to the wilderness. And they did pretty much the same with Ireland. They left it alone. It was full of weather that they hated and wilderness. It was the edge of their empire. So that's one of the components of Celtic Christianity, is it's outside of the institution of Rome that adopted the church and shaped it so massively. I'll give you a tiny history. So what happened was that around the year 664 at the Synod of Whitby, the two traditions in the UK, particularly in England, there was the Celtic Christian tradition and the Roman Christian tradition, and they adopted to choose the Roman. It was a moment in time that many people still feel very sad about. Little things like Easter was celebrated on different days, and there was a king, and he was Celtic and his wife was Roman, and he was like, we have to sort this out. So, but let's get away from the Roman Empire. Let's get back to the wilderness. Let's get back to Iona and Scotland and Ireland. Because the monks left the Synod of Whitby and they went back, and for another like 400 years they just continued on with their traditional spirituality. It wasn't until about the year 1000 that the Benedictines came to Iona. Iona is the island in Scotland, so famous for Celtic Christianity, that I lived on for 2.5 years. So when St. Patrick and other early Christians went into the Celtic lands, they brought a Christianity that was understood through the lens of an earth-based people who were Druids, and I think often we look back with an interfaith lens and we see Celtic Christianity as a blending of the Druid and the Christian tradition. I don't think it was. I think that the Druid lens informed the Christianity. And one of the things we really need to remember is that it was an oral tradition, and that they didn't leave histories and accounts in books. A lot of the stories that are written about the old monks were written 250, 300 years later. The legacy that we know of the Celtic Christian tradition is in the people who remained there and still live there, and in the art that was left behind. I will show you some of that in a little bit. And I just want to say that it's important when we look at ancient religious traditions that we honor the fact that they're living traditions, and that the people long ago had descendants, and that tradition is still very much alive. So one of the things that the early people did was that they put their the understanding of Christianity into their own world. And I want to share some photos that talk about this. So this is an image of, it's called St. Bride, and it's on the front of my CD actually. And it's Iona Abbey is in the bottom right corner, and it was painted by John Duncan about 100 years ago, and it tells the legend of how our local lass, who was Bridget, or Bide, the goddess Bide, then Bridget, Saint Bridget, how she was taken to be the wet nurse for Jesus around the Nativity. And one of the things that's so, I mean, the logic of that makes no sense, because Saint Bridget was born 400 years later, and it, if we don't look at it in a logical lens, if we look at it in a stories and wisdom tradition, what the people were doing was taking this beautiful Christian teaching and they were placing it in the details of their own life. And what emerged was a very earth-based spirituality. And here's another image. This is by John Duncan again. It's this legend of St. Columba and the horse. On the last day of St. Columba's life, the horse that used to bring milk to the abbey came over to him, and they had a moment because the horse understood that he was dying. And there's so many stories of the saints and animals and connection with the living world. One of the reasons I love Celtic Christianity is because it's so embodied. Let me get my notes up because I want to get this next bit right. Embodied living in this natural world takes God, who's often described as light years away and in heaven, into the immediateness of my day. It makes sense to me in a way that I can pray with and integrate. And if we think about the people, they lived very simplistic lives. They were very close to death. It was always at hand. And they were farmers and lived in very simple existence lifestyle. 100 years ago, there was a beautiful book published called the Camina Gadelica. It was prayers of the people that were collected from the Outer Hebrides. And they're full of prayers that accompany milking the cow and cleaning the hearth, and every detail of the life was accompanied by song and stories of the saints and stories of the Christ. But it wasn't outside of their world. It was in their world. So in Scotland, we talk about the need to read the big Bible and the wee Bible. The big book is creation, and the wee book is the Bible. And for me, Christianity makes no sense unless I do this. I'm going to give you an example. Here's John, the start of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. If I just pick up the book, I'm going to wrestle with this, trying to understand a mystery. But if I pick up this acorn from the ground and hold the tree in the palm of my hand, that mystery that John is talking about, that importance of the Christ light that was always there, that birthed in the beginning, I can understand that miracle because I'm holding it in my hand. So reading the big book and the wee book together makes sense. So a huge teaching from the Celtic Christian tradition is that of a living God. There's a wonderful song by Bernadette Farrell, who I met a few times. God beyond all dreams, you have stirred in us a memory. You have placed your powerful spirit in the heart of humankind. All around you we have known you. All creation lives to hold you. In our living and our dying, we are bringing you to birth. God beyond all words, all creation tells your story. You have shaken with our laughter, you have trembled with our tears. All around us we have known you, all creation lives to hold you. In our living and our dying, we are bringing you to birth. God of tender care, you have cradled us in goodness. You have mothered us in wholeness. You have loved us into birth. All around us we have known you. All creation lives to hold you. In our living and our dying, we are bringing you to birth. God Beyond All Names is the name of that hymn. It's by Bernadette Farrell. I love it. Another beautiful teaching from the Celtic Christian tradition is that of original blessing and not focusing on original sin. Genesis 31 says, God saw all that he had made and it was good. The big book of creation reveals it's amazingly compassionate, integral, intelligent presence, and it is good, and we are not separate from that. I read this other quote after I asked Jane to read the Jan Phillips reading at the beginning. I came across this one, and I think it's a really great understanding of what Celtic Christian original blessing in 2020 means. We are the eyes and the ears and the voice of the earth, cells in the body of God collaborating in the continual creation of our planet. We have one lifetime under this name to speak our truths, to manifest in the world the supreme force of love that cannot be made explicit without our hands, our eyes, our voices and actions. That was by Jan Phillips from the book No Ordinary Time. And linked with me, for me, with original blessing is a spiritual practice that the monks used to do, which was reflecting the beauty of God. They made their prayers very beautiful, and you can see why I, as a musician, am very drawn to this. I'm going to show you some of the incredibly beautiful documents the monks made. This is the Book of Kells that I'm looking for. So the Book of Kells was actually started on Iona. They think it dates from about the year 800. And eventually the Vikings discovered that there were monks on these little islands and they kept murdering them. And the monks had a very welcoming opening. I think there's a place called Martyrs Bay where 58 monks were slaughtered by the Vikings one of the first times they came. And I think it was because the monks waited out to welcome in the boats. And then after that, there were many times that the Vikings came and killed everybody and stole the riches. So eventually, the Celtic monks went back to Ireland, and they went to Kells in Dublin. And the Book of Kells was the Book of Iona, and this is a little image from it. It's more close up, but it really looks like this. I know that photo's a bit fuzzy, but it's Latin, and it's the 4 Gospels, and they got ink from around the world, and they spent hours making the Word of God absolutely beautiful. And I'm quite taken by this. Very taken by this. And it doesn't need to be art, this responding to a beautiful God by reflecting that beauty. Compassion and service can be done with beauty or lifeless duty. The effect of somebody who is serving at a soup kitchen with a beautiful heart is deeply healing, deeply welcoming, and makes such a difference in the world. Now Rumi, who is not at all Celtic Christian, so I just threw him in here because I'm a fan, said, "Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground." And that responding to the beauty of creation, to the beauty of the way that Jesus and St. Francis and others saw our interconnectedness, our belonging in the hands of God, is worth sharing. And they, for me, are some of the core tenets, that with stewardship of the earth, which we need to talk about so much more. It's not really a Celtic Christian tradition way back, because they would have no concept of the way that we use and abuse the earth, but it's definitely stewardship and love, and treating earth as a consciousness is very central to modern Celtic Christianity. And the Iona community that I belonged to had a rule that they accounted for how much carbon energy they used, not just for how they used their money, but also for how they used their carbon footprint. One of the best teachers, I think, of the Celtic Christian tradition is John Philip Newell. I quote him often. He also lived on the Abbey on Iona. He says this, and it gets to the heart of Christianity in the Celtic way. To the home of peace, to the field of love, to the land where forgiveness and right relationship meet, we look, O God, with longing for earth's children, with compassion for the creatures, with hearts breaking for the nations and people we love. Open us to visions we have never known. Strengthen us in self-giving we have never made. Delight us with a oneness we could never have imagined, that we may truly be born of you, makers of peace. Now, please don't worry, I'm going to give lots of other teachings from the Celtic Christian tradition. Today was just 101. And I'm going to close with some more words from the Iona Abbey Worship Book, because I really think they get to the heart of what this tradition is now. Look at your hands. See the touch and the tenderness, God's own for the world. And look at your feet. See the path and the direction, God's own for the world. Look into your heart. See the fire and the love, God's own for this world. And look at the cross. See God's Son, God's own for the world. This is God's world, and we will serve God in it. Amen. These are the words of John O'Donoghue, another fine Celtic Christian teacher. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And I will add, and may the peace and resilience that passes all understanding wrap themselves around you like an invisible cloak to keep you safe in this time of fire and uncertainty. Amen. Thank you for joining us. And close the formal part of worship and I open up our coffee time. So please unmute yourselves and chat away.